Alright everyone, Ben Shapiro has seized the title of head Nazi, according to the far left, the alt-left, from Milo Yiannopoulos. The funny part is, both of these individuals are Jewish. It was great fun at the time when they were saying like, oh, Milo is a Nazi, he's a fascist. Then of course, people realized, oh, well, he's Jewish and he's gay, so that doesn't exactly work. In truth, he's just anti-PC. He, satirizes culture because, he can look, and I'm sure he sees this, he knows this. And I'm not even a Milo fan or a Shapiro fan, but they're smart enough to understand this. They know that PC's gone totally awry, and the left has bad ideas, and this is why they want echo chambers. Their first tactic, whenever somebody who's not a Marxist wants to show up and speak, even if it were a business Democrat, even if Jim Webb tried to show up at one of these campuses, they'll throw rocks and burn trash, maybe smash out some windows, and they try to make the situation so violent and hostile, because they're violent, hostile people, that the speaker never shows up. If they still show up, they try to shout them down like megaphones and stuff, because they think that their right to free speech includes the caveat that they can prevent others from speaking. And here's why they want that. The far left in this country has crappy ideas. These ideas will not work. They are bad on an objective political and historical standard anyway, not so much a moral standard, because that's always subjective. And that's true. You can claim objectivity all you want, but that claim itself remains subjective, which is the funny part. Most people don't recognize this. The far left supports screwy economic systems, bland, boring, non-satirical, no jokes allowed style speech, basically accepted speech, which is whatever they happen to find tolerable. They've won on the progressive issues of the past that they actually had good ideas on, like gay marriage is federally legal. The state can't say, well, no, you can't get married because of Christianity or something. So they've won on those issues. What are the issues that they have now to talk about? Microaggression. Somebody said something mildly offensive on a gaming stream. Somebody said something we just don't like, and we don't want to tolerate that. Shitty issues. Issues they're on the wrong side of history on all of these issues. They've exhausted all of the issues on which they could make a positive impact. Now they realize, oh crap, we've sort of painted ourselves in the corner because, they've made their brand on haranguing about social progress, about social movements. They've run out of legitimate social qualms to have because people, more or less, are treated well in the Western world. They're treated, there's equal possibility, not equal outcome, because that's communism. When they realized this, they said, well, we can't debate anybody because we'll lose. We want an echo chamber now, so they start attacking free speech and free press. The free press is in the online world because the corporate press is not the free press. At this point, it's a little more than a propaganda apparatus for political movements. On that token, I'm not even sure that their specific activities, because they amount to state-sponsored propaganda, are even explicitly protected by the First Amendment at this point. In a more legal sense, is propaganda specifically part of that? Or, does the government itself have free speech? Because that's basically what you get on, CNN or Fox. You're getting government propaganda. That's all it is. It's a bunch of authoritarian nonsense. But we've come to that funny moment at which the same pro-liberty individuals that used to primarily fight evangelicals, like back in the 90s into, at least the mid-2000s, the evangelicals collapsed, and now they've joined up with the same free speech ranks that they used to fight, because the looming PC social Marxist issue is so much worse. It's so much more of a threat to our republic and our way of life. Now, I want to be able to say what I want to say. If somebody else gets offended at it, and under no objective measure is it criminal or encouraging of criminal behavior or specifically insulting an individual to an undue degree, being so mean-spirited it would be legitimately against, the TOS of a site that wanted to be it's not R-rated or something. Unless it's one of those things, I'm going to say what I want to say. But they don't want that. They don't even want G-level discourse. They want just specifically what they find tolerable. But the thing is, the people making this argument are way, way out there. They consider anybody who's not, at least at Bernie Sanders' levels of leftism, to be a fascist. They would even aim this criticism at some people, many people probably, when the Democratic Party. Now, on one degree, they're right, because the Democrats and Republicans are basically the same thing anyway. So if they're going to harangue the Republicans, it makes sense to do so for the Democrats. They have basically the same beliefs on 90% of the issues. Like, there is no significant difference between the two parties within the two-party system. The same fucking thing. So they're correct. But what about people who aren't part of that partisan structure? They're ideologically motivated. Well, there are all sorts of different groups, and they consider all of them to be Nazis. Therein lies your problem. So they don't want public discourse. They don't, of all people, they don't want to have to debate Ben Shapiro because he'll actually debate them. And he'll make coherent points, and he's good at speaking. As opposed to, like with Milo, when he shows up, a lot of it is just him sitting there chuckling, twitching, and cracking jokes. And making a big entry. Like that time that he was on a throne, and he had like the shirtless dudes carrying him in. And then he made points about like anti-feminism and stuff. With Ben Shapiro, it's more like he's the pundit Mr. Rogers. He's got that sort of squeaky clean image to him, actually. And he's very good at debating. So they don't want to have a friggin' discussion with him. They don't want to shut him down from speaking at all because they know they can't stand a chance against him. And they do this to everyone. They even do this to goofy people who probably can out-debate them just because they're incoherent, like Ann Coulter, who, by the way, has basically fled the battlefield just as I said she would. So don't get too comfy with Ann Coulter. You know, if you're like a Trumpite, you're motivated by specifically, the MAGA stuff. Then Ann Coulter's not your friend, and I think you're beginning to see that that's true. Only she's trying to slash you off to be part of her own fan base. I still think she's a liberal satirist sometimes. I still think that's a possibility. But no, they don't want to have a debate. They don't want to have a free, open public discourse. They'll lose. Because social Marxism, if they expressed what they really believed, for the average person in the United States. Like they came out and they said the basic platforms of what they believe in. Their message would be rejected by virtually everybody. Because they're a small, very vocal, very angry, easily offended minority of people within the country. And they're incoherent. They don't even know anything about debating. They've obviously never taken a logic class. They've obviously never taken any training in debate. They don't want to publicly speak. Because they get triggered all the time. They like when Ben Shapiro shows up, of all people. And the stuff that he's saying is not out there. Most of it basically boils down to, political correctness is not helpful for progress, number one. And number two, like I like liberty and stuff like that. You know, we want to control our borders, but we want to have sovereignty. Those are totally innocuous views to have. But when he shows up, mild-mannered as though he may be, they immediately run to their counsel and say, I need a safe space, put me in the ball pit or something like that. Please, put Tumblr up on this screen so I can cleanse my mind of these evil heretical thoughts like that people should be able to speak the way they want to speak. Because I'm just so easily offended. Basically, you're a baby, you're a whiner. Don't go and see any comedy. It's like they still think that John Oliver is legit stand-up. Like it's not supposed to be offensive at all. Like there should be nowhere in society that people are allowed to actually speak their mind or satirize or make jokes. Because they're anti-free speech, because free speech is anathema to the far left. They can't possibly win a public debate. It's impossible for them to do. They lose time and time again. Anytime you see one of these idiots trying to debate somebody who's not part of their movement, it doesn't matter whether they're just a general conservative, a libertarian, nationalistic in nature, or just like a business Democrat sort of, like, or even some sorts of progressives. Like they wouldn't debate H.A. Goodman. They'd call him names too because he's like, well, no, I don't like Hillary Clinton and screw this like, glass ceiling bull crap. They wouldn't even like him. But they lose every time. Like 99% of the time they just sit there and they get so offended that they rage quit. They're babies. They're whiners. They're cowards. They don't want to have public discourse. So when Ben Shapiro shows up to Berkeley, what do? Let's throw some rocks and get the megaphones out because we want to shout him down. Because we can't debate him. We'll lose. And there are a million people also that I can think of. There are plenty of people like YouTubers who stand against the far left. And they wouldn't be able to debate them either. It'd be funny to see them all show up for a panel or something. Like, you imagine you'd have Molyneux shows up with, like, Razor Fist and Blonde and Matt, and they show up with Sargon and some of these others, get Jordan Peterson aboard, and they all show up to hold a panel. The alt-left would come from hundreds of miles around in every direction to throw rocks and burn cars. And then these same people have the audacity to talk about, oh, evil political violence of the far right. And these people, most of them, they're not even far right. It just doesn't make any sense. And if people realized, if there were open debate on all platforms, if they were allowed to speak, if they were allowed to debate their supposed ideological opponents, then people would quite clearly see that the far left is just so far out there and so wrong at this point. Like, they think social progress means let's attack the First Amendment. I can remember back when they had good ideas, and their idea of progress was like, we want to end war because we're not comfortable with, like, you know, invading Iraq and other countries for no reason, and it's pointless. And they said we support gay rights, we support women's rights, we're tired of domestic surveillance, like it's a bad idea. Why are we over in the Middle East? They said all these things, and I agreed with them at the time. Those were good things that they were saying. Now, though, they just want to talk about microaggressions. Microaggressions and people being offensive while gaming or making a YouTube video. That's their biggest concern. They're not so large after all. And they don't have the ability to fairly debate the point because they will lose. Because any sane, rational individual isn't going to stand with them. They're going to say, what are you talking about? You're basically talking about, oh, you know, fuck the First Amendment, screw the Fourth Amendment, blackmail or you know, blacklist everybody who you find mildly offensive, and you're sitting there trying to tell me that, you know, some total neocon who's basically the same as a Hillary Clinton anyway is a Nazi. Well, you don't make sense. They do this to, they're also pissing off, I think, minority voting blocs. Like when they say Shapiro or Milo are Nazis and they're Jewish, that becomes problematic, I think, for people. When they go after some black commentator says something they disagree with, and they're like, oh, you know, then they chant like racial slurs at them. Like they call them, I'm not even going to say that, you know, somebody will probably fucking flag the video if I even say these terms. Like they use them with impunity, and they seem to suffer no repercussions. But somebody uses that as a reference to debate them on the topic, and everyone goes crazy. So, you know, screw it. Yeah. But they're intellectual midgets, basically. Now, they can't debate, and they couldn't debate the most half-assed person on YouTube. They couldn't. They wouldn't be capable of it. Like 99 times out of 100, some random YouTuber who's simply not part of the alt-left would prevail in a public debate with these people. Because they want to be part of an echo chamber. They have no training. They have no experience in debating anything. They only talk to people that they already agree with. And they have an echo chamber where they sit there humming like a bunch of evangelicals saying, Jesus, 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 or something like that. They're even rediscovering religion now. Oh, praise the Pope. The Pope says DACA should stand. The Pope says more refugees. Wonderful. So they rediscovered religion too. They're becoming more and more like the evangelicals that I was fighting against back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Well, then I'm going to have to fight against the alt-left too, because now you're the enemy. You're the enemies of freedom now. It was like hyper-religious right-wingers so many years ago. Now it's the alt-left. It's a bunch of social Marxists. That's really the truth. It's really sad that that's happened, because you used to stand for some issues that I could stand with you on. Now you don't. It went from gays should be equal to straight people to bake the fucking cake, essentially. It went from women should be equal to men, yeah, no shit, to women should be superior to men. We should throw all sorts of subsidies to people, and if you're offensive, like you don't stand with the radfem thing and want to chop your balls off, you're an evildoer. You went from, hey, you know, there are individuals who are fascistic and warmongering within the government, to you are fascistic and warmongering because you're not a far leftist. Don't you understand how you're overstretching your ideological systems to the breaking point? Like, you've so denigrated the term racist that it's like, yeah, what else is new when you call somebody a racist now? So it could be someone who actually is, like, they're really out there, they're actually violent. You can't even successfully target them because you've called Shapiro a racist. You've called Milo a racist. You've called me a racist. You've called basically everybody else. You've called millions of people racists at this point. So either I have to envision in my wildest dreams that there's a literal army of stormtroopers in the country, or I have to reject your argument and say, well, you're not being intellectually honest. You're also destroying the very core of that term that used to have some meaning, now basically doesn't, because you use it constantly. You'll even call somebody who's a leftist a racist if they disagree with something that you say. It just turns into a never-ending purity spiral echo chamber in which all of the leftists get together in that echo chamber, free of any challenge from the outside to moderate them. And they get worse and worse and worse. You're going to collapse yourselves, by the way. That's the one silver lining, is that the alt-left collapses itself. Within a few years, it begins to collapse. The fact that they're getting more vicious, more violent, and intolerant, which is funny, using that term for them, that's because they're beginning to die off. They're beginning to lose favor and realize that they are losing. So they're going to do what the evangelicals did at the end of the Satanic Panic. They're going to get more violent. They're going to get more vicious. They're going to overstretch things more. It's a natural reaction to a group that begins losing within a paradigm. They go further. Instead of trying to moderate themselves, say, okay, let's cool down, scale back a little bit, let's restabilize. That never seems to happen. Instead, they get more and more fanatic. These people, people who right now they're hesitant to wave the hammer and sickle, pretty soon they will be. They'll be wearing the Che shirt and saying, oh, communism forever, basically. That's about all. Peace out.